Annyeong, I'm Chef Atulia. Today I'm gonna show you how to make the best vegan matcha cookies using a whisk, a spatula, or a wooden spoon. There's no mixer involved, so let's get started. First, I'm gonna sift all of my dry ingredients into a medium or large bowl. I have 1.5 cups or 210 grams of all-purpose flour here. Then I'm gonna add 75 grams or 3/4 cups of almond flour. And I'm adding almond flour to this mix because it's gonna give our cookie dough a nice nutty extra bit of flavor. If you're allergic to nuts, you can also substitute this with oat flour, and oat flour will also give you a nice, slightly nutty, oaty flavor too. Here I have 1 teaspoon of baking powder, which is gonna help give rise and lift to our cookies. And then I have 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Baking soda not only helps our cookies to rise, but it also helps our cookies to spread out and get nice and crispy around the edges. Here I have 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. Salt is such an important ingredient in cookie recipes because without salt, just like any other food, your cookies will taste bland. It actually brings out the sweetness and seasons your cookie dough. Here I've got 1 tablespoon of tapioca starch. Tapioca starch works as a binding agent and also gives chewiness to our cookies because if you think about it, you mix tapioca starch with a little bit of liquid and then you heat it up, the starch gets kind of goopy and gloppy and gooey. It works like a gel-like agent to bind vegan cookie recipes and also gives it a little bit of chewiness in the center. Little bit goes a long way. If you add too much tapioca starch to any recipe, it could be a little bit on the gummy side. So 1 tablespoon is perfect for these cookies. And then for the star of the show, I've got 2 tablespoons of matcha powder. You don't have to splurge and get like $40 an ounce matcha powder that's ceremonial grade. Culinary grade is just fine. I've tried many different brands and they were all pretty similar in the end result. Sift all of that. It's really important to sift all your dry ingredients when you're baking cookies so that you're getting rid of all these little lumps that can be in your matcha powder, that could be in your baking soda or flour, so that you don't have pockets of dry ingredients in your finished product. Then you're just gonna take your whisk and mix everything together thoroughly. Now I like mixing my dry ingredients in a separate bowl like this so that when I add it to the wet ingredients, I don't have to overmix it because overmixing your cookie dough can lead to a tough cookie from overdeveloping the gluten in the all-purpose flour. There is our dry ingredients. I'm gonna go ahead and set this off to the side and bring another bowl in for our wet ingredients. For my wet ingredients, I've got 2/3 cups or 145 grams of melted coconut oil. I melted this over the stovetop in a small pot on low heat, and then I let it cool and come to room temperature because I don't wanna use hot oil and mess up the dough with that. So make sure you melt it and you cool it first before you use it for the recipe. And make sure you measure your coconut oil after you melt it because if you measure it before you melt it, it's not gonna be the same amount. I use coconut oil in this recipe because it gives it a really nice buttery flavor to our matcha cookies. But if you don't have that, you can also substitute it with vegetable oil, grapeseed oil, or any other kind of neutral oil works too. Here I've got 220 grams or 1 cup of organic cane sugar. So the sugar and the oil in a cookie recipe is going to help the cookies spread, get a crispy exterior. The less oil, the less sugar you use, the less your cookies will spread. Then I've got 6 tablespoons of any kind of unsweetened non-dairy milk. I have soy milk here today. 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Then you're just gonna take your whisk and mix all of your wet ingredients together until everything is well combined. Then I'm gonna get my dry ingredients into the wet ingredients mixture. Switch over to using a spatula or a wooden spoon and then mix it until it's just combined, no more streaks of dry ingredients left. This dough is a little bit more loose and a little bit wetter than your average cookie dough, but no worries, we're gonna pop it in the fridge for about 10 to 15 minutes, let it firm up a little bit, and then we'll portion out our cookie dough and roll them into balls. Okay, I'm just gonna cover it up. Okay, I'm gonna pop this in the fridge and let it firm up for a little bit. And now is a good time to wash your dishes. While my cookie dough is chilling in the fridge, I'm gonna preheat my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 177 Celsius. I've also put a rack in the middle of the oven so that the cookies can bake evenly, and I'm just gonna bake them one tray at a time because I noticed that is the best way to get the perfect cookies every time. That's if you have a regular old home oven like I do. If you have a convection oven, you can bake as many trays as you want. It distributes heat very evenly in convection ovens because it's got a fan in there that rotates the heat around. Home ovens don't typically do that, so I notice when I bake multiple trays, it always has some sort of hot spot issue, and even if I swap the trays out and rotate them, they're never as even, so I'd rather just bake one tray at a time. I think my cookie dough is ready. I'm gonna go grab that. Here I've got my cookie dough that's been chilling in the fridge for about 15 minutes or so. It doesn't take long because of the coconut oil for it to firm up. If you leave it in there for too long, it could get rock hard, but no problem. All you're gonna have to do is let it sit on the counter until it becomes malleable again. I like to measure out my cookie dough using a scale so that everything looks uniform and even. But if you don't, then I guess you can eyeball it or use a cookie scoop. And I wanna make about 70 to 75 grams per cookie. 70. Let's try that. Gently press it into a bowl. And it's okay if it's not a perfectly smooth ball. We're not trying to make it perfectly smooth. We want our cookies to have a little bit of character. And don't press it too hard and roll it too tightly, because then our cookies can have a little difficult time spreading in the oven. And I've also lined a container with parchment paper because this is going to go in the freezer for a little bit before we bake them. For optional garnish, at this point you can add some sliced almonds on top of some of your cookies. You don't have to. You can garnish it with a little bit of powdered sugar after they've baked. It's totally up to you. I'm gonna take some sliced almonds, just make a mess everywhere and pop it on top like that. Should look something like that. That's if you want to garnish it with almonds. It gives it a nice contrasting color, and we got almond flour in there, so adds a little bit of that more almond flavor. Just do that with maybe a few of our cookies.
Dunk it into the almond. Make a mess everywhere. No worries. You can clean all that up later. Yeah, get some almonds on top like that. Another one.
Okay, I have a couple of them topped with almonds. The rest, I'll just top them with some powdered sugar after they've baked. Here's my cookie dough that I portioned out, ready to go in the freezer. Pop a lid on. Or you can cover it. You can use a little tray if that's what you have. These go in the freezer until they firm up again, which is gonna be at least another 10 to 15 minutes. Or you can just leave them in the freezer and bake one whenever you feel like having a matcha cookie. It will keep in the freezer for about up to 3 months. Here I've got my cookie dough. They've been in the freezer for about 10-15 minutes. Let's see how they are looking. They look pretty good. They look like they're frozen. Not rock hard frozen, but firm enough to handle, and that's all you need. And we freeze the cookies so that they don't spread too much. I'm going to place a few. Maybe I'll do a little bit of the almond one too. Yeah, we'll just place a few of these onto our baking sheet. And you just want to make sure there's enough space in between your cookies, because these cookies spread quite a bit. Yeah, I think that looks good. 5 cookies. I'm not gonna eat all these cookies by myself anyway, so I'm only gonna bake half of them, and then the other half I'm just gonna put them back into the freezer. So I'm gonna bake these cookies in my preheated oven, so I'll see you guys in a bit. So I dusted the naked ones with a little bit of powdered sugar. I think I'm gonna try one of those. First thing I notice is the matcha flavor. It's like the perfect amount of matcha flavor balanced with the sweetness. This is exactly the cookie that I was going for when I was developing this recipe. Crispy around the edges and soft and slightly chewy in the middle. 맛있다. It's perfect. Of course, you gotta have it with a little bit of non-dairy milk. 맛있어. So there you guys go, my vegan matcha cookie recipe. It was a long ways to get here. I thought this cookie recipe was gonna be a breeze, but it ended up being one of the hardest recipes to perfect because the dough is really finicky. I had to tweak it dozens of times to get this exact recipe. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Make it for yourself, make it for your family and friends. Share it with everyone. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. 안녕!